When is it time to hire a podcast coach? I get this question all the time, and so I thought we would delve into it, especially the myths and understanding a little bit more who is a qualified person for a coach and who isn't. So, do you need a specific number of downloads? Or even, do you need to have it all figured out, air quotes, before you get coaching? And so this podcast episode is going to be covering questions that I get on my Instagram, but also behaviors that I notice since launching my company in 2020 and working one-on-one with podcasters. Just a caveat, this podcast episode is going to be sharing from my experience, conversations with other experts in the industry, but primarily focused on women, multilingual, and also underrepresented communities in the podcast space. And if you don't know anything about me, I'm Anna Xavier. I'm the founder of the podcast space and the host of this podcast, which has the same name. And I've worked with podcasters from all over the world, from Australia to South Africa to Sweden and even Mexico. So I have a little bit of a global view of podcasting. So some of these strategies definitely been tested around the world. So let's dive into this episode of the podcast space. Now, this is perhaps one of the most collaborative episodes that I've ever created because I had real life conversations with listeners of the show, with Instagram followers about not only like how they perceive what it is to have a coach. And so a lot of the conversations that we had were incredibly powerful in shaping some of the comments that I'm going to make in this episode. But also a big thank you to Sandy, who's host of the Power of Connection podcast. We just had such an amazing conversation, and it actually shaped some of the ideas that I had for these episodes. So thank you, Sandy, for our great conversation. And if you're listening to this and I'm like, man, like, how can I do that? How can I have conversations with my listeners? You should definitely check out episode 87 and 43, which I'll leave in the show notes, because I'm talking about how to incorporate listener feedback and how to get more listener feedback that you can use to shape the podcast and create content that people cannot get enough of. So when we're looking into podcast coaching, there are a few different things. There are some coaches that will work with you on your podcast, but actually they have a bigger overview. There may be like business coaches, or that they are coaches for creatives, so they're like an umbrella, or maybe they are coaches to help you like find systems or maximize the ROI of your podcast and your business. So there's going to be a few things I'm going to be talking about specifically me as a coach, but also a content strategist and marketer. And so basically I work with impact-driven podcasters, and we always look at what is the goal of the podcast. I have clear criteria of working with people. You may notice that some coaches only take clients by application. Some people have 1 hour coaching. So you drop in, you book your time, and you work with them with just that one off. Other folks have kind of programs. There's people that do 3 months, 4 months, 6 months, and up to a year. So there's a lot of options out there. And that's one of the first things that I want you to realize is that you can actually hire a podcast coach for maybe a month or once a month. I actually personally also have those options where it makes it more affordable for you, and it helps you figuring out what do you actually need in order to move forward, to get unstuck without having to commit to a really big coaching package or coaching program. And so that's like the first kind of overview of some misconceptions about podcast coaching. And let's dive into the first one, my personal favorite. I'm not successful enough to hire a coach. This breaks my heart when I hear this, because we, hear a lot of people. The people who are highly successful in our eyes are normally the ones that have big podcast numbers or have big audiences or are multimillionaires or have it, air quotes, all together. I definitely hear that all the time. And so it's not that you need a podcast coach only if you're having those thousands of downloads and have a big audience, have sponsorships, and you want to maximize it. No, you can really start finding a coach because you're trying to find better systems, like a strategy to move forward, or even if you're looking to change your mindset. And that is something that I personally would admit I did not realize how much I was going to be talking about mindset to my clients as I do. And just as a side note, I had massive imposter syndrome when I started coaching. I actually had a client that she's an executive coach. She's been a coach for years, maybe 30, 40 years. maybe 30. Anyway, she is super well respected in her field. She's so smart. And I was like, hey, like, I want your thoughts on something. Like, I find myself coaching a lot. I coach you. And so she laughed and she was like, yeah, like, that's true. And I said, I have this imposter syndrome about coaching because I'm like, I don't have qualifications. So she said, hey, here's 3 books that you can read that will give you the frameworks you need. And I was like, okay, rock and roll. So let's go. And so even I had a little bit of mindset to work through. And it's been really interesting because when you're looking through the needs, it's one, you determine what success needs to look like, but also I think that most people have this like detachment from what they think success is and how successful they already are. And so getting clarity on what is it that you want out of this podcast, having like a goal is equaling to that success, right? So if you hit it, successful or pivoting, but it's the journey. So I want to go through a few elements that can identify that you're looking for a coach. So number 1 is that you're really overwhelmed and you're getting analysis paralysis. And something that I noticed early in my career was that with podcasters, you have 2 types of podcasters, the neurotypical and the neurodivergent. So neurotypical clients, normally, they need the answers to some questions that they have. They get the answers, they go and implement it. They do not need any support. They're on their way. They can identify and implement. And when we're looking at the neurodivergent clients, they're like, oh, squirrel brain. I get so excited. I want to do all the things. I get really overwhelmed if given too many solutions and too many options. So I need accountability. And so that's when I, for instance, have like sales calls for potential coaching clients. We talk through that. We talk through like, how do you create best? And like, how are you like in the field of I want all the options and make the decision and go and implement the plan? Or do I get really overwhelmed? And that helps me guide clients as well. So if you're thinking about a coach, really understand what kind of client they serve, because the format that they provide their coaching program or their transformation may not be good for you. So just keep that in mind. So another way that you realize that you may be needing coaching is that you're feeling really stuck. So you want to be successful, but you're feeling really stuck. You're like, my podcast downloads are not growing. I feel like nobody is inviting me to be on their podcast or asking to be invited, or nobody is commenting. I feel like it's always the same 5 people. Or that you're not really clear why things aren't working. And that may be because your message is not clear or consistent. And so you can't determine that you're being successful because there's all of these doubts, all of these questions. So you need to think about, even though it's an investment, you will get clarity in so many of these questions, which kind of ties with the second limiting belief, which is I need a clear niche before I commit to coaching because I need to figure out things. Like this is what I hear a lot is get figured out on the niche, getting figured out on the goal, which I'll also talk about. Like there's a lot of, I need to figure out this first before I commit to coaching. To which I answer, the whole reason why you're paying someone's expertise is to get their answer. Like you're paying, hey, this person built their knowledge over 20 years, 30 years, or 10 years, or 5 years, whatever it is. And you're instantly getting access to that expertise by just hiring them, right? Like I feel like sometimes, especially as people who are very crafty, and I'm going to be talking about that in a second, but one of the scenarios that happens a lot in my coaching is that because the podcaster is an external processor, so basically they figure out things as they are talking about it, they realize, oh wow, like I never thought about this, because they're mavericks. You're listening in right now or watching the show. You are a maverick. And so it's unlikely that when you're talking to friends, they don't have a podcast. Or if there are other people, they may just start a podcast and you've been podcasting for a while. And so you may not have the knowledge to connect the dots and dive deeper into what is it about this audience and figuring out your niche specifically with a coach who will help you ask you the right questions. That's when you realize, oh, okay, like the content strategy that I was using maybe it wasn't specific enough. And maybe that's why those keywords were not being used on the titles, they were not being used in the episode. And that's why maybe like that reaction was lukewarm because you didn't have all of that clarity. And so it's not that a podcast coach will execute everything with you. They will help you build a plan, and you still need to work through things yourself. But again, if you're having a coach, if you're having those thoughts, you can ask follow-up questions, right? So if you're stuck, if you need to figure out things deeper, if you don't understand, maybe, has that been done before? If so, what are some formats you can replicate? And, it's like when you should replicate and when you should create your own. Those are elements that I feel like a coach can provide you context, and then you can execute on the plan versus you just staying in overthink mode. So another belief, which is I need to have a goal first. And so when I think about this, I always think about the expression, you don't know what you don't know. How can you determine a goal or how can you determine when your podcast will be successful if you don't know about the possibilities? And this is just simply like, you don't know what you don't know. You could be already successful within the niche that you're working in, or within the segment of the industry or the format that you're trying to do. And you would have no idea. I have this conversation with podcasters all the time. I'm already getting fired up. But I have this conversation all the time with podcasters who are like, I don't think I'm doing enough. This is not good enough. And I'm like, okay, you know that from like looking through benchmarks, you're doing pretty good. Or for the amount of effort that you're telling me that you're putting into this podcast or the tools that you have available, this is insane. This is really good results. Do not stop. But they wouldn't know until they asked that question, right? Because they were just not able to again, connect those dots and understand like what makes sense in the industry. Because all you hear is publicly shared numbers like thousands of downloads and deals that got done. Those are like the ones that, I have, and I've said this before on the podcast, I have no issue saying it. I have under 1,000 downloads per month. And my podcast is a great tool. I've been to London. I've been to multiple places in the US. And people know my brand, and they say, I listen to your show, and they'll tell me like the ways. I had the most amazing conversation about a podcaster who was incredibly stuck, and there was one episode that really helped her grow. And I was like, this is the most amazing thing. Did I need $1,000 per month? No, because that's not literally the impact that I need to worry about, because I'm already with under 1,000. I'm already changing lives, which is amazing. People are already listening to the show. My impact is still visible. And so I really want you to really think about, if you're having a goal, a coach is supposed to also help you understand when you're looking at what is going to help you move the needle to get to that goal and what isn't. One of the things that I talk about with my clients all the time is, what processes are high impact and high effort, low impact and low effort. And so you have to combine, especially if you're someone who is always trying to innovate and find better ways to do things. You could be in analysis paralysis a lot because you gave yourself too many options. And so you somehow lost track of your goal, right? And a coach is going to be able to reel you back and go, okay, you tried a lot of different things this month, but what was it that actually helped you get to the point that you needed? Or like remember the big picture. You're supposed to do all these things to get to the end goal. Let's not get distracted with side quests. And so I really would like to remind you that a podcast coach can help you determine realistic goals with your time, availability, energy, and your resources that you have available. You may want to say that you want to increase 10% month on month your downloads. And a coach may say, actually, that is a little unrealistic with all of the resources, time, and effort that you want to put in, right? But maybe 1% is consistent. But again, knowing that at the end of the year, you would have increased a lot more than if you were trying to aim at the 10% and got so overwhelmed with the different options that you did nothing. Moving into, I think by now is like number four, yes. I don't have it in the budget right now. That's a big limiting belief. And look, I'm not going to ignore or minimize the fact that in a lot of places, the economy is shaky and there's a lot of uncertainty. So I get it. If you have the difference between you feeding yourself or paying rent and getting a podcast coach, look, I'm not saying to go hungry, right? But what I will say is that you need to make a committed effort to make that happen. Because I hear a lot of people saying, I can't afford it right now. It's not in the budget, as an excuse because they don't feel like they can invest. They're like not ready yet, right? And so it just like the money is an excuse. And this is where I will say the few times that I've worked with male clients, which is not that it didn't happen, but the few times they were never afraid to invest. And here's a mindset reframe that I want you to think about. You will be able to get the tools in order to make your return on investment on that coaching investment. What I want to ask yourself is, are you afraid of just not being confident enough in your abilities that you can make it happen, that you can implement what you need to implement in order to get to your goals? This is like the question that you have to ask yourself. It's not that it's too expensive. It's not that you're afraid of it not being worthwhile. It's truly, I find that the reason behind that is mainly like confidence issues and imposter syndrome more than making it in the budget. And then on the other side, it can be just you wanting to trust that person that you followed for maybe a year, 2 years, 6 months, 3 months, whatever it is, that they have the skill set to make it happen. And you have to believe that. You have to trust in yourself and you have to trust them. But let me talk about a little bit of a reframe. So a podcast coach can help you find the right budget or the right opportunities to pay for that coaching. That has happened time and time again. You can listen to podcast, which one is it? Oh, episode 57 about how my client Hethel and I worked to get her sponsorship. On that episode, I think we basically found a way to get her on a donation drive all the way to $500 just from 1 week. We had a big push. We made that happen. And since we're working together again, and last year in 2024, she was able to secure up to $7,000 in different types of sponsorships for her podcast and for her brand, the Global Health Pursuit podcast. So that is one of the things that probably if she was doing it by herself, she would have been able to secure some sort of sponsorship. But we were able to secure that type of money because she was like, okay, I know you've secured sponsorships before. You know how this works. How much should I charge? Like, how should I pitch? That's one of the things that I offer on my coaching. I have a lot of resources, places to help you grow your downloads, templates to help you pitch, what you should include on those pitches, how to nurture those relationships. A lot of these questions that you have, I have an answer for it. I already created. And that's what a coach should have. They should be able to tell you exactly the questions you need to either ask or the answers that you need to have in order to move forward. Looking through my notes, I really want you to think about when you're thinking about how much you should be spending on podcast coaching. Again, as I mentioned at the beginning of the episode, you can use the kind of like the one-off coaching sessions, which honestly, they're best for people who have like very specific questions. But I find that sometimes on those conversations, there's more questions that get open right after that call. Because again, you don't know what you don't know. And how much should you budget for a podcast coach? I'm going to tell you the numbers from my side. There's people that charge more, there's people that charge less. I have like a once a month coaching program. So it's just like we just meet for 1 month. You drop in with the questions and then we meet again next month. It really helps if you're someone who can implement, but you need that accountability every now and again. That's $250 per month when you're committing to a year-long coaching program. That makes it more affordable for a lot of folks. My coaching program, as of right now, at the end of March of 2025, I have a coaching program that is $1,500 a month for weekly coaching calls. You sign for 4 months, and that's a total of $6,000. So those are quite different, right? So you can have that more manageable, more budget friendly where you're just checking in once a month, or you can have a more intense coaching. Now, there's people that charge $100 per coaching session. I would caution that maybe they're still in the early stages of their career. For most people, right? You're paying what their expertise is. And there's people that charge $500 per session. There's people that charge $7,000, $10,000, $20,000. I one time paid, I think it was like $7,000 for coaching. And so for some people, they're like, okay, if you're telling me that I can spend $250 and get the answers and get like the mindset coaching that I need and that will fix it, yes, awesome. And there's people who are like $250, that's too much. Or some people that are like $250, that's not enough, right? Oh, you must not be good. So there's all of these questions that you have. You need to look at it holistically. And so thinking about investment and thinking about time is money, right? That ties in with my next point, which is I can find anything in the internet for free. That's point 5. That's a misconception that I hear all the time because people are like, I have time. I can spend hours researching. But what a few problems that come with that is that the internet is free. Yes. But if the internet is free, imagine how much money you could be saving by getting the answers right away instead of having to spend 6 months getting to that answer. And this is when we're going to be doing a little bit of a moment of silence and a little pause because I never bash on anything. I don't normally criticize, but I feel like this is something that is a word of caution. So there's a lot of coaches and gurus on the internet, especially this is very popular, showing their income, whatever, like statements or whatever that is, saying, oh, through my one formula, I took my podcast coaching clients and now they bring in leads, $5,000 every month from their podcast. And so I want to caution you with some of those like blanket statements because a good coach should help you find the tools, the systems, the processes, and the mindset that you need specifically to your situation. And so I would caution you from a coach that is, this is my program. It works for everybody. So just be paying attention and ask questions when you're thinking about what's their process. So going back into I can find anything for free, like reality check. So I want to make sure that when you're thinking about free advice, they don't know your circumstances. They don't know what your limitations are, how you best work. And again, it goes back to you don't know what you don't know. So if you're spending hours researching, you're likely to be experiencing analysis paralysis or making very little progress. So the last thing that I want to mention to close the podcast is we really need to think about the only 78% of podcasters who actually make it to episode 50. This is a statistic from Podmatch's report from independent podcasters, and we really need to think about it, right? A lot of folks start a podcast. Very few, as we've seen, only like less than 10% make it to episode 50. And that is because while the spirit of the DIY, the scrappy podcasting mindset does take us very far and gets us into amazing opportunities, it stops a lot of folks from reaching that next level or being overwhelmed overall, right? So I want you to consider what you've been able to do by yourself and making sure that you are not falling into these traps of thinking by yourself that you can just find your niche, find your clear goal. Also that you don't need to spend money, that like you can just figure it out, DIY it. The internet is free and so all the information will be there. But also that you need to have a goal figured out before you hire a coach because they're going to be able to help you identify those points about what is best about you, what is best about your brand. And one thing that I do like looking at is like, what is already working? Because we don't need to be working harder. Like a coach is supposed to help you streamline some of those processes to make growth faster, to make growth more effective. I want you to really think about if all of this resonated, whether that's me, whether that's someone else as a coach. Really give yourself a chance to succeed, to create a podcast that you want to create, that you want to have the impact that in your head you want to have. It is possible, but you need to work with someone. And again, podcasting is collaborative. So you need to find the right coach to get you there. You have that passion, you have that love for podcasting, and you love doing this. But at some point, passion is not going to get you. Grit is not just going to get you. Really think about, if you were to be able to be supported by someone, how much more enjoyable the journey would be, knowing that you have someone by your side that can be your cheerleader, that can be removing all that doubt from that podcast journey. So I invite you to reach out to me if coaching sounds like the next step you need to take. I have 2 coaching programs, one for folks who only need coaching once a month, and the other one for the weekly coaching for people who are more hands-on and who want to see results faster. So you can book your free discovery call to grow your podcast ROI in just 30 minutes. I'll have the link in the show notes so you can really learn how to grow your podcast, what are some options, how you can make 2025 your podcast success. And it may be that we're doing it together, you and I. So book your discovery call. The link will be in the show notes. If it's easier, drop me a message on Instagram and we can take it from there. I've been Anna Xavier, and this is the Podcast Space. I'll invite you to keep creating imperfect content that moves you forward. I'll see you in the next episode.